All right, we are live. Let me make sure that we are transmitting. It looks like, let me just make sure here. Okay, all right. All right, everybody, welcome. It is Seahawks Brendan Nelson coming with your weekly collaboration with Brendon of the Hawk's Nest. You guys have viewed our work in the past. You guys have liked what we've done together. You guys have liked what we've done separately. So we are coming to you once again on this week of weeks where they don't look too good right now. There's
It's a
not a
dark
whole lot to
time.
celebrate. Yeah, I mean, we got an offense that didn't even look that good with their quarterback. Now they don't have their quarterback. We got a defense that has allowed 450 plus yards in 4 straight games. We've got players requesting their release just so they can go to a team like the Bengals, to give you an idea of how dysfunctional our team is. And that's the perfect word I think that can be used to describe this team right now: dysfunctional. I don't necessarily believe it's a bad team. I think they do some things well, but they are incredibly dysfunctional right now. And as a fan who has watched and laughed at other teams in the NFL who I thought were dysfunctional, looking at it from the outside, it kind of hurts to now be rooting for one of those teams. But that's where we are right now. This feels like a very dysfunctional organization, feels like a dysfunctional coaching staff, and that gives you a somewhat dysfunctional roster. But we still have 11 games to play, or, well, excuse me, I guess 12 because of the additional game. 12 games to play this year, and I can't not watch them. I got to watch them because I'm a fan. That's what we do. And I can't not be a fan of this team. So we got stuff to talk about because we got 12 more games to play. So, Brendon, welcome to the show, first of all.
Thank you for having me. I always appreciate it coming in.
Mm-hmm. And where's your head at on this team right now? I think we all kind of know what the answer to that might be, but go ahead.
But yeah, I think we're probably pretty much aligned 100% down the line on our thought process of where we are, which is, to me, the season came to a staggering end this last week against the Rams. Is it come to an end and that we mathematically could still get to the playoffs? Sure. Is there a magical run that could come along out of the ether? It's happened in NFL history? Sure. But I don't lean towards the anomalies or the outliers or the unlikelihoods. I lean more to what is the reality of what we're looking at. And dysfunctional is a great word to use on your part, because within dysfunctional, it's not a lack of talent. It's not a lack of
Mm-hmm.
ability. Within dysfunctional, it's that you should be better, but you're not even getting to the point of ability or talent because you can't even get past step one of just being a basic operational football team at this point in time. I think that is apropos, and I think that right now we are looking at, outside of that miraculous miracle-like run, we are looking at the end of the era in more ways than one, in my opinion, on this. I think Carroll, at this point, outside of just holding on for dear life in the bitter end, is going to probably retire at this point. And at this point, I'm not even thinking it's an either or. I think we're at a stance now where we're looking at both of them going and having to probably rebuild this all the way through from top to bottom.
Yeah, I am prepared for that possibility. I made a video kind of talking about that because a lot of fans are uncomfortable going there, and I get why. Rebuilds are hard. Sometimes they take a while, sometimes they don't work, and then you're out like 3-4 years. But that doesn't mean you're not supposed to do it. You sometimes in life you do things that you know can go badly, but you do it anyway.
Yeah.
So
Not
yeah,
every choice is going to be a fun choice to make. That doesn't mean
yeah,
that it's not the right choice to make.
right. And so looking back at this Rams game, I know that there was one thing that happened to that game that everyone's really thinking about right now. There was one thing that everyone really took away from that one. And what happened was so significant, it almost makes you forget about some of the other stuff that happened to that game. And
Mm-hmm.
it makes total sense why. Like I completely understand why coming out of that game, you might not even remember what happened in that game other than Wilson got injured.
Yeah.
But he did get injured. He's missing at least 3 games of football. I think a more likely number is like 6, but time will tell. So Geno Smith does come in and play pretty well. And I feel like fans almost started to get a little ahead of themselves with it because they saw Geno Smith have 2 good drives where, if you're being straight honest, the offense did look a little better than it did with Wilson, especially in that game. But what do you think we're going to get from this offense with Geno Smith over these next 3 games?
I would probably reckon to believe that he comes back down to earth, is showing people why he is a backup quarterback in this league. My theory on him coming in and doing better comes from this point. Russell Wilson's been your quarterback for 10 years, and there is a deep, thick book on how to play the Seahawks offense with Russell Wilson, down to how you mush rush on the edges, to how your secondary plays, to how you got to be aware of his mobility. It's a very itemized, detail-centric game plan in how you play Russell Wilson, because he's so uniquely different from any other quarterbacks really out there in the way he plays the game. Geno comes in there and they've been prepping for Russell on the brain. They don't even know what Geno does or Wanda does or what his tendencies are going to be. And then he comes in there and kind of catches the defense on their heels, as well as they went into some soft zones, because by that point they were up by points and they were just trying to make us earn our way up the field 98 yards, especially on that first drive. I think there'll be things he does within this offense that will be improvements over Russell Wilson, but Russell Wilson is still by far a way better quarterback than Geno. It's just that there's things that quarterbacks have pluses and minuses, and some of Geno's pluses are probably a little bit better of playing within the context of the offense, playing within just make your reads, make your throw, trust your reads, all that other stuff, where Russell will probably get a little bit more into the inventive, I'm going to figure something out here where there's no clear ideal way to go through with this. So, but to your point on this, if Geno goes out and balls out for 3 games, goes 3-0 and is lighting the world on fire in this offense with the same personnel, those people are going to get louder and louder, and they may have a bit of a point at that point.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely something to be said for maybe, and it's too early for me to say this, but maybe Russell Wilson is a good quarterback, but he just doesn't play championship football. Maybe there is some division there between being good but not being able to play the way that you need to play to win at the highest level. It's like a point guard who's really good at taking people one-on-one off the dribble and scoring on double teams, but he's a bad passer. Like
That's
most teams do.
Perfect.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like, yeah, you're a good player. You'd be great in an and one league or a pickup game at the YMCA. But when it comes to winning at the professional level, maybe you're not that guy. So you are going to see Geno do some things better for sure, I think.
Yeah.
And some people are going to fall for that. I can already tell you that right now.
Yeah.
But I'm thinking about the deep ball, which Geno does not have the way Wilson has. Wilson has maybe one of the best deep balls in NFL history if you take a look at his accuracy combined with his propensity for going deep.
Yeah, I agree.
And the other thing is turnovers. Geno's always been a turnover guy, a guy who's going to give the other team the ball a couple times a game. Wilson, even at his worst, keeps a lid on the turnovers pretty well.
It's Geno throws with better anticipation. If you're going to throw with anticipation, though, you're probably going to have more interceptions come up, as we saw with that Lockett play, where Lockett was held kind of at the end, couldn't get out to the outbreaking route. Geno throws the pick. To your point, that's what you'll get with Geno. He's going to give you more turnovers, for sure.
Yeah. So because of the Wilson thing, because of the Geno thing, because of these things that happened in that game, I feel like people have forgotten things like how bad this defense is and how bad it was in that second half, where, I mean, somehow, some way they come out on fire. They play an incredible first half of football, holding the Rams to 3 points. Yeah, they give up some yards, but they get a turnover in the end zone to take points off the board. They're getting some pressure. The secondary's playing better. We see all these things, and then somehow it seems impossible, but at the end of the game, we're still looking at them going, wow, these guys are terrible. They gave up 450 yards again. They gave up, I think, 3 long touchdown drives in that second half. And we're right back where we were with them after the Vikings game to me. So I saw some things that really disturbed me from the defense. One, the main thing that I saw coming out of that game was Pete Carroll's comment. I don't know if you heard this, but I talked about it a bunch in a video where he said the things that we did wrong in that Rams game were the things that we spent all week practicing, and we still didn't get them right. When I heard that, my first thought was, is this team even giving effort anymore? Because when I hear that, I go, okay, either the players aren't giving effort in practice or they're not giving effort in the game, or both. So, I mean, how do you view something like that?
I probably look, there may be a little bit of an effort aspect to it. I look at it as more of, this is why I get to the stance of it's time for Carroll to go. Your scheme has been solved. It's broken. And what the Rams were doing, and they did the whole, you heard it, I'm sure, in the telecast with Troy Aikman calling about it, drafting routes to one receiver goes forward, one goes right behind him. We've talked about this before. The Rams are not doing something incredibly intricate in the way they're attacking the Seahawks defense. They're literally just basically operating off of the flood zone concepts. Run one player through a zone, second player comes through the back of zone, your defender has left the zone, it's wide open, easy completion. There is no, in my opinion, there is no, at this point, strategical turn of the dial you can do to fix this at this point. They would have already done it. Every shot that's in the barrel of the gun at this point has been fired. That they've got any sort of thing that I already think they're operating off a limited angle of as far as adjustments within this defense. We're just going to play what we are. We're going to show you what it is. We're going to be better than you at executing. We're going to be more disciplined than you. Yeah, that was all well and good 10 years ago. It's a modernized NFL. And if a team sees that you're going to keep open flood concepts over and over, and I'm sure you saw this as well, they would run the same play out of different formations in that second half. The very same play. You could see it on the all 22. One guy swings on a crosser route. Here comes the other guy through the back end of the crosser route. And this again speaks to me on your coaching inadequacy and deficiencies that they bring to bear on a weekly basis. Defenses should not be this bad, Brendon, like you were saying, where you're good to the first half is okay, but then the second half, when it starts going bad, it's completely just a dumpster fire, and it's instantaneously. And there's no water, there's no sand or kitty litter that you can throw over the top of it. It's just going to now go until we get to the end of the game, basically, is how it rolls out. And that, to me, again, comes down to how broken your scheme truly is and how it's passed Carroll by. This game's passed him by in his ability to make those kind of adjustments and fix things. And maybe the players, to your point, I can't say that you're not wrong in that respect. It could be the players as well, where we're looking at this being divvied up, where it's some coaching and some of the players' effort, and they don't trust the scheme and they're not in. But that, again, just comes right back to me, the coach and the figurehead at that point needing to go. If he can't get the players on that page, if he doesn't have an adjustment, either way, it does, to me, barrel back down on Carroll. And I just don't think he has any answers. I think he's tapped out in that respect.
Yeah, and it seems like every time we find an answer, it doesn't last that long. Like, we traded for Quandre Diggs a couple years ago because the defense was bad, and he made our defense good for like a few games. But then the defense went right back to being bad again. Last year, we traded for Carlos Dunlap, and to his credit, that did fix the defense for like half a season. But now this year, we're bringing Carlos Dunlap back, and he's not doing anything much, or, well, not really. And the defense is bad again. So it just kind of feels like everything's just a little piece of scotch tape where, yeah, you bring in this guy, you trade for this guy, you bring in, you do this or that, or this guy starts playing better, and that fixes it for a little while.
Yeah.
Would
you not think that maybe the little of that is the dealing of the symptoms and not the root cause of issues there too within that? And that the fixes you go out are stuff to, let's stop the runny nose, let's stop the shivers, but you're not really eradicating the what's causing you to be sick in the first place. Do you think there's a little bit?
Yeah, there's absolutely some of that too. But I'm also looking at some other things with this defense. Like, okay, the Seahawks gave out 3 contracts this offseason that I think were mainly designed to help us stop the run. Poona Ford, Al Woods, and Kerry Hyder. I know Kerry Hyder's a defensive end, but he's a big end. I think
you're right.
He's more here to stop the run than rush the passer.
100%.
So by my estimation, those 3 signings in a vacuum have all been at least a mild success. Poona Ford, I don't think he's comfortable as a 3-tech, but he's not playing badly. And PFF loves the hell out of him. That means something. Al Woods, PFF might name him MVP of the league if this keeps up. They love that guy. They think he's like Warren Sapp from the 20 years ago, basically. And Kerry Hyder, I actually think Kerry Hyder has been somebody on this defense who I think has mostly done well.
Agreed.
So I'm looking at those 3 guys. I'm like, okay, you bring in those 3 guys to help stop the run. As near as I can tell, they're all playing pretty well, but we have the worst run defense in the league. So that's what I say dysfunctional. How is that even possible? How can you hit on 3 defensive line signings like that and still you can't stop the run? How is that possible? I don't get it.
I think you're missing in all the other places. You're right. Those guys have all been at least plus sides to that defensive line. But then you look at the other angle. Brian Monet's elbow injury has reduced his effectiveness since he suffered that. Carlos Dunlap, you mentioned about not getting pressure. I don't think he's stopping at the run at the same rate he stopped the run last year. Your linebackers around Bobby Wagner, who's been okay. He's been one of the better middle linebackers. That's more just because middle linebackers across the league, there's a dearth of them right now. But Jordan Brooks has been horrible. Cody Barton has been horrible when he's in the game. I don't think you've had great play out of the Sam linebacker. I've watched both Alton and Darrell Taylor get blown out of their lane, blown out of their gap. The team continues to run Rasheem Green out a significant portions of the snaps. Can you explain to me why? Why is Rasheem Green getting any snaps at this point? What has he shown us through 5 games? What has he shown us through the 3 years of his career to have him earning 50 snaps a game? And I've watched him in games, especially Derrick Henry, that big Derrick Henry run. He gets blown out of his gap from the inside. He gets taken from his outside Leo end spot to basically where the one tech defensive tackle started out on the line of scrimmage on that big Derrick Henry run where he breaks the tackle on Trey Flowers and Quandre Diggs ends up trying to tackle him and can't do it. That's you see over and over with Rasheem Green again. And this coaching staff, as we've seen, will trot out guys who are not being effective because they're hoping that the light bulb pops on and that they'll suddenly now miraculously turn it all back around and it looks good. But I think it's all of the rest of the parts around those 3 guys you mentioned, which are not really holding up their end of the bargain in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah. And it just makes you think that they don't have any answers anymore because they keep trying to do the same things over and over again with some of these guys. We keep seeing cornerbacks play 7 yards off receivers. How many times did Jordan Brooks end up in coverage on Cooper Kupp in that Rams game? And we know how that story ends. We don't need to watch it again. We don't need to see that movie again. I know how it ends.
Where were our dime packages this week, Brendon, that were so effective against the 49ers? We talked about that you found this wrinkle, this thing that you hadn't been doing. You found a way to get 2 safeties on the field. There's some ways it was really effective against a Niners team who you'd think would have attacked you in the run game the second they see you go dime first 3 wide receivers, let's say, but they weren't able to do that. Then Carroll gets asked about it and he's like, just wasn't really in the game plan this week. I don't know. Just wasn't in there.
Yeah, sometimes it seems like he doesn't know what's going on with his team. He was asked about that, and he basically said, I'll take a look at that. Like he didn't know. Like he's an outsider or something like that.
I'd like, I don't get it, Brendon. That's the stuff that drives me insane. Like what?
Yeah,
what are you talking about? That's your defense. You have a defense that is scuttling, has no answers. It can't stop the pass. It can't stop the run. Can't stop the short pass. Can't stop the long pass. And now you find your wrinkle in week 4 against the 49ers that kind of works. And then you go to the next week game against one of your biggest rivals and you go that you've not had an answer for defensively in recent years. And you go, let's not use that. It's like almost to me on that kind of basis with that. It's that type of stuff that repeats again and again. It's that you see these stats that come out again and again. It's 92% what you show pre-snap is what you are post-snap. It's playing Jamal Adams 40% of the time in single high looks. Why are you playing Jamal Adams as a single high safety? What sense does that make on any realm at all? None. That's what you have Quandre Diggs here to do. You know, I mean, I hope you kind of feel the same way, but it's the part that drives me crazy is again and again and again, they're messing it up, forgetting this, not using this player right. Oh, this guy's been super effective. Let's give him 7 snaps. It's just that type of stuff keeps wash, rinse, repeating, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And Alton Robinson played 6 snaps against the Rams. And that might have been because he was not 100% going into the game. But if you can only play 6 snaps because you're injured, then just make him inactive. You're not worth anything if you're only playing 10% of the snaps, stuff like that. That's why I said last week, and I continue to say it, I don't trust this organization right now. I've seen too many times they say, oh yeah, this player's healthy. He's about to get back onto the field. And then the next day, the day they go on IR.
Yeah.
Or,
yeah, they're not honest with us on stuff. Look at the Sherman thing with trying to reach out to him as he's in the airplane, trying to keep him there. They play these games with stuff, and I don't have any trust either at this point. They've lost the Pete and John we trust was built upon the fact that they had made these prior moves. And if they made stuff that was questionable in 15, 16, 17, say, well, in them I trust because I've got the Super Bowl era to lean back on. We're now far removed from that era. We now have a lot of bad decisions and choices made across drafting, across free agency. We're still sitting on $12 million this year. For what? I don't know. For in a year that's make or break, in a year you're trying to keep your franchise quarterback, which would lead me to believe, Brendon, they weren't all that interested in necessarily keeping their franchise quarterback, being we're not using that space. We didn't convert Russell's base to bonus. So you're sitting on 20 million plus that you decided not to use this year with a roster that looks like this.
Yeah, none of it makes sense. And now it's kind of too late. If you trade for something now, it's like, well, okay. when's Wilson coming back? Because we're not going to go to the Super Bowl with Geno Smith. So at this point, maybe you are better served just saving that money. And I hate to say that, but
I agree
now
with you,
with
though.
this Wilson
Yeah,
thing,
I
and
agree.
yeah,
Sorry.
and yeah, it's fine. Yeah, ironically, it came on a game, though. I have to say, I think the offensive line played fine last week. I think they actually, is in pass blocking, played pretty well. Of course, it has to be that game where Wilson gets hurt somehow. Of course, it can't be
Yeah.
the game where he gets hit 20 times. It can't be the game where he gets sacked 8 times. It has to be that game where I actually thought we were starting to make some progress there.
I agree. I think it does hurt a little bit, though. The thing that bothers me about it is that we talked last week about that game and what the Cardinals had done with Aaron Donald the previous week and how they had effectiveness with Aaron Donald, really doubling him on every snap or nearly every snap as they could. And on that play where Russell gets his finger banged, yeah, that's not funny. Gets bangs the finger. He's essentially it's a single block. I believe it's Gabe Jackson trying to hold up against Aaron Donald one-on-one in that situation. And it's again where you go to and go, look, the guy that's been the most devastating defensive player against you over the last 10 years, who sacked and hit Russell Wilson more than any other player, you're still not doing anything. You've not done it by bringing in an elite guard. He's getting pushed into the backfield. And I do agree with you that they did pass protect better last week. But just on that given play, how that doesn't sit in Russell Wilson's brain in that moment of, okay, I finally got beaten up by the guy who's been beating me up for years, you guys could have done something about, be it schematically, let's double him, or let's go get the great guard and pay the price to go do that to neutralize this guy. You did none of those things. You never found an adjustment really for him in that. And now I'm injured. That I think that's got to resonate with Russell in a certain kind of way.
Yeah, I expected it well. And I kind of feel like, I'm seeing all these Seahawks fans who are trying to put the pieces together of this season to where it can still not be over. Where, yeah, okay, Wilson's out for 3 games. These next 3 games are against weaker opponents. I just feel like all these people, because Wilson got hurt, you forgot that this defense is one of the worst in the league. If they give up 450 yards on Sunday, it will be the first time in NFL history any team has allowed 5 straight games of 450 plus.
Yeah.
Like they are setting history. They are breaking records that you want no part of.
And as you said with the dysfunction, and as I've called it degenerative, those positive people you talk about will reference back to last year. And they say, well, look at last year and we were giving up the record yards and then we found the turnaround. Well, let's take a couple of items from that. First of all, number one, you still were able to stop the run last year. It wasn't you're giving up all the passing yards and all the run yards. You at least did one thing decently as a defense, even in that record-breaking amount of yards you were giving up in the air. The other thing is that the schedule got pretty darn weak for us on the back half of it last year. Backup quarterbacks, Dwayne Haskins, Colt McCoy, the Giants. I mean, you definitely weren't running through the same kind of schedule I think we're running. Now, our back end schedule gets easier this year as well, but we still have some tough guys available. New Orleans, Washington football team, Green Bay. They're still far off into the schedule, still some tough guys up there. It's not going to get as easy as it did last season, in my opinion. And those two things are the thing that is different about this year. They're not stopping the run when that's the base of what you're supposed to do defensively. That's a bad warning sign at that point. That's a 4-alarm fire. Everybody get out of this building, because this defense is built. It's at its base moment to stop the run, even before not giving up the big play. Carroll wants to stop the run first and foremost, yet he is unable to do it. Unable with sometimes 2 1-techs out there, with Al Woods, like you talked about, playing out of his mind, with Poona Ford coming along. To me is that's where the optimism for me sort of drains away in a little bit of it. Where if you're optimistic, you have to have it based upon something beyond just the homerism of your fandom, right? It's got to actually have something tangible that you can look to and go, yeah, but there's just this one thing. If we fix, then it'll all be okay.
Right. Yeah. At this point, I don't even know if I want to bring in another player, especially to this defense. I'm like, we have talent on this defense. If we can't win with this talent, why add more talent? Why just add another thing that's ultimately not going to produce when we need it to? Like, everyone was excited when we brought back Carlos Dunlap. He's not playing terribly or anything, but he's not having a big impact on these games.
Oh, he's disappeared. The guy was the most effective rusher over the back half of the games last year. The most effective, efficient rusher there was in the sport. He hasn't even gotten a sack past the 2-point conversion he stopped on Carson Wentz in week 1. I mean, it's how does that fall off in that way? How does Jamal Adams now look like a fringe safety in this league? To me, I don't think across the board, all these players got that bad over the course of one off season. Right. I think what's happening here is that degenerative is the word I go to. Carroll's schemes is degenerating. His ability to influence these players and motivate is degenerating. And the proof is right there on the field every single week.
Yeah. And I didn't think there would be a team in the NFL that was foolish enough to trade the farm for a safety without a plan to specifically utilize his talents. But it seems like we are that team. And I can't believe it, but I have to watch it every single Sunday where Jamal Adams still has 0 QB pressures through 5 weeks when that is possibly the best part of his game. And this guy made first team All Pro with Adam Gase as his head coach, surrounded by garbage on the Jets, a team that is much less talented than our defense is right now. Even if you don't think this team is that talented, we have more talent than that Jets team did.
Bounty Greg was his defensive coordinator. Greg Williams, who's had a defensive coordinator job in like 20 places and is a headhunter in how he teaches. And I like that they got the better out of Jamal. And that's inexcusable. And here's again the point on this is that you can have optimism in Carroll, but when you see a duplication again and over a given scenario happen over and over again. So this is exactly the same situation of Jimmy Graham, right? This is Jimmy Graham 2.0 on the defensive side of the football. Jimmy Graham was an H-back tight end, or he would sometimes, most times, 66% of the time on his dispute with the franchise tag was actually in slot as a receiver, a slot wide receiver.
Oh, yeah.
Seattle brings him here and they go, let's turn you into an inline tight end. Well, isn't that the same thing you're doing Jamal by now turning him into a single high cover 2 safety? That's not what he is. You're trying to force fit this circle into your square peg on your team because you don't have enough imagination and how to get the most out of that player. And this coaching staff again and again does not get the most out of players. They get the bare minimum or they leave a little bit on the table. You know, for a first round pick, Jordan Brooks, have you gotten the most out of that first round pick? LJ Collier, the most out of that guy? I never liked LJ, but you didn't even get a smidgen of tapping into whatever potential was there. Trey Flowers in 4 years, nothing. That to me again this is where it's too many black marks after a period. Too many things of this is wrong, that's wrong, and it doesn't come back to a talent deficiency. You got enough talent. Coaching deficiency at every turn in scheme, in teaching practices, and in development.
Right. And you brought up Trey Flowers, so we can spend a second on that. Because obviously he got released, and I'm seeing all these people I made a video about it when we released him, of course, and a lot of people in the comments were celebrating because they didn't like Trey Flowers, and I get it, but what are you really celebrating about? We just wasted 3.5 years developing a player and got nothing out of it.
Yeah.
I don't know what there is to celebrate about that. It's not like we're saving that much money. It's not like we're saving time because his rookie deal was going to expire at the end of the year anyway. So this is a guy who played probably 2,500 snaps for us over the last 4 years. This is a guy who started a couple playoff games for us. This is a guy who we really invested time into, and we got nothing out of it because we got nothing to show for it. We've won 1 playoff game since he got here, and he was the worst player on the field in that game. So too many mistakes like that. It seems like we can't get things right. And sometimes we get things right and then we do something to make it less impactful, like the DJ Reed thing. You find a diamond in the rough with him last year. He plays well for you. This year, you bump him over to the other side and he looks awful. And then it takes you 3 games to realize, wait a minute, maybe that's a bad idea.
Another common thing, though, that they do, that this is, again, common themes. What is it they've done with players all across the board again and again? Moving them out of their natural position where they'll show success initially into a different position and then have him bouncing around and never just putting him at one position. A common mistake and thing we see over and over. Damian Lewis. I think Damian Lewis is playing worse this year than what he played last year at the right guard. I think that is absolutely connected with the fact that you moved him from right guard to left guard. And they've done this over and over, and it's never really, it has almost never worked. And even when it works, the returns are so small and insignificant as to really not you shouldn't be concentrating on that when it worked, like the Justin Britt. It took you failing Justin Britt at right tackle, failing Justin Britt at right guard to eventually get Justin Britt for one good year of center play before you paid him, and then it was below league average level beyond that. That's not a success story at that point. That's not you going, wow, he knocked that one out of the park. That's a miss. And that Trey Flowers, it shouldn't be that you celebrate Trey Flowers leaving. It's to your point. It should be, wait, how is it in 4 years of him being here, he gets worse as a player almost from when he walks in here? How's it Coach Carroll talks about in his press conference this week about, I spent more time with him than any other player I've had through here. I was just, really? You as the cornerback whisperer spent more time with this guy in 4 years and he got worse as a player. And I shouldn't take that away from you and go, there's a little bit of an indictment on you here, Coach. There's a little bit of shade I got to toss your way on this one now because of that. I don't know how you can't come to that conclusion in that given scenario. And the only upshot for us, Brendon, of course, is that with the Bengals grabbing him off the waivers today, they are on the hook if they keep him on the roster through the rest of the year, at least for the rest of his salary. So that $12 million goes up a little bit.
Well, he's probably going to play a little better over there too now, so be prepared for that.
Yeah, watch him just ball out. Watch.
Yeah. Okay.
Watch him digs it.
Yeah. There was a player many years ago for the Cowboys named Terence Newman, a cornerback like Trey Flowers, and he was really good for a few years. But then in 2011, he had a terrible year, and every Cowboys fan was like, "Get him out of here. He's awful. He's the reason why we missed the playoffs. He sucks. He's terrible." He leaves. He goes to the Bengals and is good for like 6 more seasons. Cowboys spend $50 million bringing in Brandon Carr, and he's no better than Newman. And then they realize, oh, that wasn't the problem. I'm not saying it's going to be the same thing here. I think it's going to be a little reminiscent of that, where I'm sorry, but Sidney Jones looks worse than Trey Flowers ever has so far to me. And I feel like you're going to be looking back at Trey Flowers in a couple years and going, that guy wasn't that bad.
Well, I definitely think Sidney hasn't done anything look at, and again, Sidney's looks worse right here than he looked with Jacksonville last year. Jacksonville, he looks functional on that tape against those games. He looks good. He's holding up. He's not giving plays, whereas here he looks completely lost. How come players are worse in your scheme when they come to your team versus other teams? That doesn't make any sense. I know Quandry's a guy who did take a step forward as a player. I'll give that credit from what he was in Detroit. But that's, again, the one outlier versus the common rule, which is seemingly guys come in and they're now lesser of a player. They're just not getting the most out of them. And I agree. I think Trey got beat on for a long period of time. I was good with by the time we let him go, but I think that they should have addressed the cornerback position this offseason more so. We didn't have the knowledge of where Trey Flowers was on the practice field or what Achilleo was showing in the practice field. This coaching staff did. And when they realized we have a problem here, there's a hole, let's patch it up. They didn't patch it up. They just left the hole gaping open and said, let's just let it be what it is,
Yeah, and the point I made a whole bunch earlier this week was 6 weeks ago, we thought that guy was good enough to start for us. So in 6 weeks, we went from this guy's good enough to start to we think so little of this guy, we don't even care if he's on the team.
Yeah. Not a new guy. Not a new guy. You've had for 4 years. You had Cain, that 6 week period. You had Cain knowledge before that 6 week period, who he was, what and what you're going to get out of him. It feels a little scapegoaty at this point with the release of him to me, frankly, just a bit.
And let me get your take on this. Do you think he got benched because he was playing bad, or did he get benched because he said the scheme was bad in an interview? Which one do you think really?
I couldn't say for sure. Because I think that there's definitely a chance this coaching staff was going to rub back, and they weren't going to be able to push back against Quandre or Jamal or any of those other guys. So they went after the guy that is the low man on the totem pole. That would equal that. I think that he was putting what he put out there. They were just trying anything different at that point with Sidney. I don't think they had a lot of confidence that Sidney was going to be an answer, as evidenced by they gave him weeks before they actually inserted him in the lineup once they brought him over by trade. So they were very slow in even bringing him into the lineup. I think they knew he wasn't any better, but that's a little bit of their PR game that they play with stuff, even on the field with having guys start, where it's like, well, see, we're doing something. See, we're trying some wrinkles and stuff. We're not just sitting, standing pat, doing nothing. See. Oh, see, we called Richard Sherman and tried to bring him back off the plane. See. But it's disingenuous. They're not being, you're not really trying to address the corner position. You didn't go trade for a CJ Henderson. You didn't do anything with the Gilmore situation. This is what you've done. And that's where it's, again, inexcusable, and their feet need to be held to fire appropriately because of that. Because you guys have had a chance to do something about this, and you did nothing. You sloughed off. You just tried to get on through, and more, I think, is them just trying to kind of get through this year. Yeah, they were hoping they'd win, but in a year over the last 5 or 6 years, I think this was a year they were just kind of, we'll muddle through and then deal with the Russell Wilson situation at the end of the year. And then we'll have some cap space, and then we'll get it all figured out. And then we'll re-click in. I'm starting to get a little bit of a feeling of that they weren't necessarily all in on this season in totality, kind of in, half in, lukewarm in, Diet Pepsi, Diet Cola in.
Yeah. And the question is, even if they did go all in, would this coaching staff have been able to do anything with whatever extra talent they could have brought in? Because I don't think this is an untalented team. We've said it a million times, and I'll say it as much as I need to. I think there are good players on this team. It's just, it's not manifesting itself on the field.
I don't know that getting those other players, 2 or 3 other players you used with that cap space, would have made a phenomenal difference on this football team, because I do think it's broken at a schematic coaching level in how the problems that are coming from that level. So bringing in other players, again, will just deal with the symptoms, not the root cause. The cause will show back up. Maybe it's in the playoffs. Maybe you get a win or 2 more, but you end up back in the playoffs in the same boat with this whole thing. So I think it is broken, and I'm with you. By the way, at this point, I'm standing pat. I referenced this on my show with it. Look, you crapped in the bed, now you get to sleep in it, Coach Carroll Schneider. You guys out on your money. There's not a lot of players available. There's no answers out there. Probability. So sit on it. Fix this. Show us utilize with what you've got. Don't expect it to be saved from the outside by you mortgaging our future, which is already somewhat mortgaged here, as we're going to hand the Jets probably a top 15 pick in this next year's draft.
Right. Like, thinking about some of like this Trey Flowers thing and some of these other things that we've been talking about. Remember J.R. Sweezy?
Mm-hmm.
That was a guy you drafted in the 7th round, and then you switched him from the defensive line to the offensive line and said, this guy's going to be our starting guard. That sounds like a terrible idea, but it kind of worked, and he was okay.
Mm-hmm.
We don't hit stuff like that anymore.
No.
Like that. I mean, not that J.R. Sweezy was great, but he was a functional right guard starter, and he played almost every game for the last 3 years of his rookie deal, and he was at least good at run blocking. So you got something out of that. Like that sounds like such a bad idea to take a 7th round defensive end and make him a guard, but we saw something, and what we saw was correct, and it kind of worked. And we just never get those things right anymore.
But I think that the memory of that working is what sits in Coach Carroll at the front of his brain, rather than the Christian Soka Jews, right? That you tried to, or the Drew Nowaks at center, right? Those kind of, so you tried this again afterwards, and it fails, which is what more often that should happen. But you're then getting obsessed or staying obsessed on the one time it actually worked when you did it. And that's where, again, as I repeat often, I don't want to rely on an outlier situation. I want to try to rely on more of a rule of thumb rather than trying to find the miracle unicorn way of doing things. That's not sustainable, really. But you're right. They don't do that type. There's not that type of success story that you can go to now and what they've done, especially with all the position moving that they've done. All the guys that they've tried to move around, Jordan Brooks to the will, and Damian Lewis from right guard to left guard. And we're still seeing it across the board all the time. And it doesn't really work. Marquise Blair to strong. I don't even think that yet has still been proven as a success. Him to the slot off of safety. I think that
he's barely playing right now.
Yeah. So I mean, why you keep doing it without any modern successes, without any real success in the last 5 years of doing it. So why do you keep doing it? And of course, the reporters won't ask them this. The media doesn't ask them, hey, Carroll, why are you sitting on $12 million? Why haven't you guys used that? Some questions you and I would like to see asked so we can get a little bit of an understanding of what I can't even understand what their mentality is here, little Brendon. What is the mentality? What were you trying to do this year? What is the long-term approach here as a team? You're not really in go for it now approach, really. You have talent, but there's indicators you're not. You're kind of looking with your 2 to 3 year plan, but you've got a Hall of Fame quarterback kind of through the end of his prime right now. What is the guiding light here of this organization? What is their principal belief where they're going? We can go through other organizations with like the Ravens and maximizing Lamar Jackson's rookie contract and putting as much talent around him, right? Or Mahomes, and let's rebuild this whole offensive line around him. We're going to create a super offense going into the future. You can see the mentality of other organizations and what they're trying to accomplish. And I don't see that here. I can't even see like a rough outline, a silhouette. It's just this muddled thing it's like a Jackson Pollock painting. You know what I mean? It's like that instead of something that's like a Mona Lisa. Oh, I can see what they're doing now. That's brilliant. That's so smart. That's so, I'd like to see more of that from my organization.
Right. Yeah, I've definitely had some people in the streams compare us to the Chiefs because now we're both 2-3. We both don't look that good. Both having bad seasons, but I always say, like, this Chiefs defense is getting what they're paying for.
Yeah.
They didn't invest very much into that defense. They've got a couple of guys, Chris Jones, Frank Clark, Honey Badger, but they are getting exactly what they paid for with most of that defense. There's a reason why they plucked Jaron Reed off our garbage pile this offseason.
Yeah.
They just wanted a defense they just wanted to field 11 guys and hope their offense could win every game. That's not what we did here. And it's not working great for the Chiefs because now I think Joe Thuney got injured. He's going to be out a while. It's not going the way they wanted it to, but it's kind of by design almost. Of course their defense is bad. They don't have good players. This was not supposed to be the way way here.
And you weren't surprised by that. I thought we talked about this a little bit with the Chiefs. I might be remembering this wrong, but we both were looking at the Chiefs as we came into this upcoming season where we did have a lot of faith in them, knowing what they're coming off of: 2 Super Bowl runs, Super Bowl loser, and the history that's plagued the Super Bowl loser as far as injuries, and just you played a lot of extra games the prior couple of years. You're not super deep, to your point, on the defensive side of the ball. All of those things kind of wrapped up to where you could see the Chiefs starting out a 2-3 phase of things, and it would be understandable. They rebuilt their whole offensive line this offseason. Did we do that? Did we and again, knowing that the success of an offensive line is built upon continuity, probably first and foremost. So if the Chiefs struggled without having that continuity in the offensive line, if their defense isn't good because it's played so many games, that doesn't surprise you. That doesn't surprise me. We nod our head and go, that makes sense. It doesn't mean the Chiefs' plan was broken. That's what I'm saying. Like, their vision was at least solid. Like, you can have a solid strategy in football and it still goes to hell, because that's the nature of football, right? Injuries suddenly start. You did everything right. You built depth, but then one positional group just gets ravaged, and then another one gets ravaged, and then you're done. And it's not your fault from a strategy standpoint. You could have been smart in your base strategy, but we're not being smart in our base strategy point. We're on the base level of things. That's the part that I'm going after. And I think the Chiefs thing is just not a good comparison. You're only looking at the record, and that's the only real comparison you can make. We only added 1 new offensive lineman this offseason. We're in go for it now mode. We didn't come off the heels of a Super Bowl losing season. We aren't due for a drop off like Super Bowl losers would be. I can't make that same comparison, Brendon. Can you? Do you think it's kind of apples and oranges on that too?
Yeah, I don't see a comparison there. And one thing from Seahawks fans right now, there's a lot of things that drive me crazy about some Seahawks fans right now, but one thing I really don't like, one sentiment I saw after that Rams game was basically people saying things like, well, we've been good for a long time, so, a season like this had to be coming eventually. That's not how it works. It's not like the Seahawks flip a coin at the start of every season, and if it comes up heads, they're going to be good, and tails, they're going to be bad. And then we just hit heads for like 8 seasons in a row, and now we hit tails. Yeah. Like, this stuff isn't random. This stuff doesn't just happen. Yeah. This stuff happens because you make the wrong decisions in who you hire as your coaches, the wrong decisions on your players. That's what causes it. There's no coin flip at the start of the season that determines whether every season is good or bad. It didn't have to be this way.
That's the beauty of football, is that football is something you can quantify as to why things go wrong. That's why we love what we live, and looking at it from an analytical side is that you get to really get in the details and understand why things go right, why things go wrong. And you don't have to wonder what is it to go wrong because this, like you said, ran it because the wind blew to the left today. Is that why I went back? No, it's because we can't stop the run. We can't stop the bad. We can't. Those are the tangible things that you can go to your mind. And whether you're good for prior years or not, every season is different. And if you're talking about having a Hall of Fame quarterback who's in the back end of his prime, and this team looks this bad around him, and you surrounded this talent around him, and you surrounded this scheme around him, I don't care what's come prior. You as the coach and you as the front office should be kind of whacked on the hands for that, because you're letting go an asset is the toughest asset to find in football. A Hall of Fame quarterback in his prime. Do you know how many organizations out there that would cut off their fingers to just get that? And you've got that hardest thing to find, and you can't build the ancillary stuff around him. That's the part where you're failing at, and that's the part where, to me, they've got to be held a little bit harder than if you have a team that, let's say, was like Chicago recently, right? Where they just can't find a franchise quarterback, and then they finally make one. It's a bad choice. And this isn't that. This is you had a lot of guiding light here. You had a lot of opportunity to put this right. And as you've talked about, this is a 4-year rebuild. You've had time to get this thing to the right point where this should have been hitting on all cylinders this year. You should have the NOS hooked up to your stuff in the back trunk. You should have been good to go. You had the 4 years to get to this point. This is the building to this spot, not the, crumbling away to this little, tiny piece ledge that's left. That's not what you did here. And that's got to be, I think, put in the proper, appropriate perspective in this, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's, I think, enough about the general dysfunction of this team. And there's a lot of it, but we spent a lot of time on it just now. It's not cool. It's not good right now, but we have games to play. And I want to be clear about something with this team. People ask me questions like, should we sign Cam Newton? Should we sign Blake Bortles? And I'm like, who cares? Like, there are real big problems with this team. And you're thinking about signing a quarterback who hasn't been good in 3 years or 4 years, or in some cases was never good. Like, I don't care about little things like that. I barely care about this Steelers game, because I almost feel like actual football is a distraction from what's really going on with this team. Yeah. So we have to talk about this game.
Yeah.
But part of me is just like, can we not even think about these games right now and instead think about what's really going on with this team?
I'm in the same place.
We
I'm in the
got to
same
do
place.
it.
Yeah, we do. We do have to do it. We got to cover. And I got a couple notes on this in playing the Steelers. So I'm with you on. But it is hard for me to look at this with anything but not just thinking about the off field, thinking about the future direction of this team. I mean, we're going to see potentially as big a change in this organization as we've seen. Quite frankly, you could almost go back even beyond Holmgren's era to like when Holmgren came aboard, because at least when, Carroll came on, you still had Hasselbeck, you still had a little bit of vestiges of the old guard there, whereas we might be looking at a full everybody out, everything new in kind of look to things.
Carroll blew the team up pretty cleanly. Like
He did.
I remember like the first thing he did was cut TJ Hushmanzada, who had just signed a $50 million contract. He was like, I don't care, get out of here. I don't like you. You have a bad attitude.
Yeah.
And there were a lot of players that he was just like, okay, out, just all over the place. And I think that was a genuine rebuild. I think that was a legitimate rebuild.
He went the first season, though. He kind of kept the roster in the first year to kind of assess what he had a little bit. And then that next year after is when the churn really kicked into place off of that first 7. And, he had that, the 7-9 season or something like that when he first came in with Hasselbeck. And then it was really everybody out. To your point, they really blew it out at that point. They did a lot of turn to agree, but just that we're going to be without a starting quarterback, without a head coach, probably, maybe without a new general manager as well, maybe coming into the fray. And that's a lot of turnover. And I'm actually excited by it to a degree, and because I think I want to see something new and different, even if it isn't going to give us to the ultimates, at least something new and different that's trying to use a different methodology than the old tired one that we've seen applied for 10 years now.
Yeah, absolutely. I just picture Pete walking into the room the day after he gets hired and looking at Kelly Jennings and just wondering where the 8 inches up here went, and like, how am I going to work with this guy? Like he could not have liked that.
So wait, he weighs 160 pounds. He doesn't have any ball skills. He can't track a ball for his life. He gets bullied around the football field by guys like Fitzgerald, who's got 25 pounds on him. Why did you guys draft this guy? Wasn't a first round pick with it? What? Huh?
Yeah.
Well, Rusko liked himself as 4-year starters for major programs. So that's why we picked him. What?
Daryl Tapp. Daryl Tapp. Remember the fullback from USC who got drafted because he was Holmgren's friend? That was not a good run of drafts.
No, it was awful. And Rusko coming in, and again, that we talked about Carroll, that initial success sometimes you can have will get you caught up and get you missing what you're doing wrong then when you go 3 to 4 years down the line. And so Rusko comes in and he has that draft where he brings in Lofa and Leroy Hill and a couple Marcus Tubbs, some really good players at that point, to then combine with what Holmgren had built with the uber talented group that were head cases off the field. And that meshed for 1 year of just perfection. But then Rusko, the more years he continues to draft with his Kelly Jennings, remember Darius Butler? They got that. Remember him too? That
I remember him.
Oh my God. You went with just some guy. Josh Wilson was like 5'6" as a cornerback. I think you draft, but it's bad drafts by Rusko because he had this item of, it wasn't about metrics like it is with Carroll. Carroll was the opposite, where it's more about not what you show me on the field in college, about what do you do size, speed, lengthwise, the spark scores that they were really on hot to trot with back in the 2010, 11, 12s, as far as how they evaluated prospects. It was kind of the opposite of Rusko, which that's part I will give Carroll credit for. Is that whole crap that Rusko got caught up with, a 4-year starter, major program. Don't slice and dice your prospect list down like that, because you're going to start being your list will narrow down real far, real fast at that point if you do something like that.
All right, so this Pittsburgh game, you said you had some notes on them. Obviously, they got a good defense. Offense has been pretty bad. So we've got another case of a stoppable force meeting the movable object with our defense and that offense.
That is exactly right. Exactly.
Who's winning that one? What do you see with these guys?
Well, I do think that the Steelers, because it's on the road, it's in Pittsburgh, it's with what's going on backup quarterback. I can't predict that we're going to get a win in this game. I do think it'll be a close game. I watched the game last week against the Denver Broncos with Pittsburgh. Their offense is a little bit like ours. Our old offense used to be under Schottenheimer, where there's no real pre-snap movement. So it's a little easier for defenses to figure out what they're doing offensively pre-snap. Not a lot as much moving parts and confusion there. Roethlisberger can't push the ball down the football field anymore. He's averaging about 6 yards an attempt off,
Mhm.
what Russell was up around 10.5 or something like that when the injury hit, just to give you some comparison there. He also, on top of not being able to really push the ball down the field with any sort of velocity, he's now struggling with accuracy on top of it. He's down there like 63%. The modern
Yeah.
NFL era is set up for you to be up at 60, 69%. So he is struggling to push the ball. The thing to me the Seahawks have to do in this game, though, is you've got to make him uncomfortable. He really is in that mummy mode right now, Brendon. When the quarterbacks get to that point where they've been hit all over the place and you see him walk off the field. Elway was like this at the end, where they're just sort of,
Mhm.
and you can almost hear the pain in the joints as they're walking. I feel that with Ben when he's moving around the pocket. And so there's a play last week where the defender hits him, and an old school Ben, he'd slide the defender off, move a couple steps, and throw a 60-yard bomb. But this barely taps in, the ball's fumbled, he falls over onto his feet. If you give him a clean pocket and let him set up, he's gonna dink and dunk you, because he knows he doesn't have the arm strength to push it down anymore. So why not in this game? My point on this is bring the house. Get Jamal up on the line of scrimmage. What do you have to lose, right, Brendon? You got a backup quarterback in there. What do you got to lose? Your safe defense hasn't been keeping anything safe. Your soft zones haven't been preventing anything. Get Jamal up there. Get Ben uncomfortable. Get him moving, because he doesn't move like he once did. That you're going to have a lot more success with him on that. I still don't think he's going to slice and dice you necessarily, even if you give him a clean pocket, because I just think he's in that Drew Brees mode of last year, where the skills are diminishing and they're really going downhill.
Brett
Le'Veon
Favre
Bell's
2010.
Brett Favre 2010. Yep, exactly. Very much the same
Mhm.
way. Where when it goes with Peyton Manning on their Super Bowl winning season at the end in 2015, where it's just he's a shell of himself. You're seeing that on Ben on the tape. It's showing up quite a bit. He's still capable of every once in a while letting one rip. He threw one to Deontay. I'm watching the game. I'm like, ugh, man, this is rough. Then he throws like a 50-yard bomb to Deontay Johnson. You're like, oh, geez, okay, you still got at least that in your skill set. And I will say this about Najee Harris. I think that they teach their running backs to do the Le'Veon Bell thing. He's doing the Le'Veon Bell hop around the back of the offensive lineman and picking his holes, like jump here. Oh, that hole's not open. I'll bounce behind my center here. And he's doing it okay. He's only averaging about 4 yards a carry, but that's because they, of course, had to rebuild their offensive line this offseason. And Villanueva's gone, DeCastro's gone, Pouncey's gone. So they're still a work in progress with that, which is all the more reason you should be able to generate some pressure, by the way. And then offensively, it's all about how do we beat them 2 years ago when we went in Pittsburgh. That was a game, I don't know if you remember, that really stood out to me as one of those few games where Russell Wilson was really utilizing the short passing attack to combat the blitzes, right? Because Pittsburgh's bringing the house with the stack fronts. Wilson's getting the ball out of his hands. I think if Geno does something like that, beyond what we do in the running game, the passing game is what's going to win this game for us if we're going to be on the road. And to me, that's going to be Geno getting the ball out of his hands, making the appropriate reads pre-snap to get that job done. And that's kind of my way to get it. So pressure on Ben, intermediate and short passing game being really effective, kind of like what we saw with Geno when he first came in last week a little bit. Not to that maybe that degree, but somewhere in that line, you could maybe win this one.
Yeah, I'll believe it when I see it with this defense. I'll say that. I know we can sit here and say it makes all the sense in the world to play up, bring the house, challenge Ben to beat you deep, because it seems like he can't really do it anymore. I hear all that, but I want to see it happen before I start to think that it's possible. There's still part of me that just expects us to go out with the same game plan we had against Matt Stafford or any other quarterback in the league. It just won't surprise me. But you're right. That's not a very good Steelers offense. I say this as if I have any faith left in this defensive coaching staff, but if they can't find a way to limit that Steelers offense to, under 350 yards, then I'm really, really going to lose the already no faith that I have in them. So hopefully that's true. That Pittsburgh defense, though, pretty good. They've got some really nice players on that defense for sure. What do you other than, the intermediate passing game, do you think maybe the running game can get on track at all this week against them? What are you seeing there?
I don't think so, because I think what the Pittsburgh's going to do with the backup quarterback is they're going to say, okay, Geno, you beat us. And so what that means to me is that they're going to bring the same kind of stack fronts they would otherwise, first to stop the run, then get to the quarterback. And so this is going to be on the place where you can attack the Steeler defense. The one spot where they do have some vulnerabilities is in that cornerback and that secondary. Minka's great, but outside of Minka Fitzpatrick, the other guys are not as good out there. Joe Hayden's getting kind of old. you can go after the secondary a little bit if you attack it. But I think in the running game, they're going to bring 8-man boxes up there. Why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you test Geno, knowing he doesn't have the greatest deep ball? It's not like Russell where he's got that moonshot ball. So that's the place where Geno's probably at his weakest. So you'd go, okay, Geno, we know you're not going to hit us over the top deep. We'll make you, we'll bring the heat and see what we can do, and we'll stop the run. So you have to beat us. If you beat us, then fine. You beat us in Pittsburgh on a primetime game, so be it. But if I'm Tomlin, that's where I'm riding with my strategy all day long. And I don't let Seattle do anything on the ground. Don't let them be balanced at all.
All right. So that's kind of the X's and O's of this game. And I'm pretty much in tune with you. I think a lot of what you said makes a lot of sense. I can get behind a lot of that stuff. Here's kind of what I'm seeing. I already mentioned the effort thing before, because I hear, oh, we spent all week in practice on this stuff and we still can't get it right in the game. I see us not able to stop the run despite playing 2 one-tech defensive tackles. I see us getting destroyed by the same play being run over and over again. I started to question the effort. Now your quarterback gets hurt. Some people are saying, oh, the defense is going to play harder now because they know they have to play hard in order to have a chance to win because they have no quarterback.
Yeah.
I hate to say this, but part of me is ready for this team to just decide, whatever. Like we get paid either way, right? So don't tell me NFL teams never quit. Don't tell me these guys always give 100% effort. They don't.
Yeah.
Part of me is kind of prepared mentally for this team to start to show that they're just going to lay down and not play hard for this coaching staff on Sunday night.
Well, and I think to your point on this, I don't think it's a light switch. You're in that mentality of truly competing and truly going balls out, laying it on the line. That doesn't go off one week, on the next week, off the next week. You're living in that mentality or you're not. And so far, what we've seen up until this point, Brendon, through 5 games, is a team that's not living in that mentality. There's no edge to this team. There's no fire. There's no spirit we're seeing on the field. Not even an echo of what we had seen in the Legion of Boom era. And I'm not talking about talent. I'm talking about fire on the football field. That kind of will and mentality you have to outgun another man across from you. And I don't see it on either sides of the football right now. I see a lot of going through the motions in the players. And so, yeah, you're right. If we're already seeing it now early in the season, when there's stuff on the line, when you have a chance at the division title, when there's something to play for, how are you not going to see that get lessened and removed even further? Now your quarterback's gone. We're going to see more results of the defense struggling. There's going to be more losses coming along, and the season's going to look further and further away at that point. Absolutely, it will come down. I 100% agree with you on that. That's something more likely what we're going to see as a general theme moving forward through the rest of this year.
Yeah, and I hope it doesn't happen because I don't want to have to watch it. I don't want to see this team quit. But it does occur to me that it would affect instant change, because if there's anything that will get the attention of Chuck Arnold and Jody Allen at the top, it will be this team laying down in back-to-back primetime games, because we've got the Steelers and the Saints back-to-back here. So part of me is wondering if these guys are even really going to show up and give effort, because so far this year, I feel like there has been a decent amount of effort. They just haven't been smart. I have a feeling some guys on this defense might just be a little not smart. And that includes, unfortunately, I have to say, Jamal Adams. He might just be a little, I don't know. There might just be something not quite there with him. But I feel like they were trying hard. They just don't have a lot of brains. Like I'm looking at a guy like Marquise Blair. I don't know, or Jordan Brooks. I'm looking at these guys. I'm wondering if there's a little Aaron Curry there, where they have talent, but they don't have the mental talent to manifest that.
Well, I think that's a great comparison between Aaron Curry and Jordan Brooks, in the respect of they struggle with the very same thing, which they want to be run stoppers first and foremost, and they'll eventually get around to being back there in coverage, and that it's the part of their game that shows up and over again where they're a step slow in coverage at every turn. They're not in the right place where they need to be. So that's absolutely correct. I do think they've been playing hard a little bit up until this point. I don't think they've been playing with the kind of fire this defense requires, with the rally to the ball need and the going ripping out balls, trying to get fumbles out, to just being ferocious, which I don't think you'd ever describe this team defensively the last 3 years as saying they're ferocious. Which I think if you're going to be a simple scheme like we are, and you're not going to confuse the opposition, you've got to bring something else to the table other than we're just going to be super disciplined. Right. So that's that X factor to me, of that energy and spirit that you got to bring if you got that wild dogs on D. Everyone's a dog. Everyone's trying to hit everything that moves. which you just don't have going on right now. And it could be a smart deal. The thing about the smart thing that comes to me, and this is a little bit of the problem that I had with the people not people, but the players talking about the complicated nature of the scheme, like Flowers struggling with it. You run this most simplified defense in the NFL. Well, what is there to get confused on? You know, you don't have on pre-snap, you don't have if this guy does this, I'll do that. If that guy does this here, then I go here. But if this guy rounds around on the end around, I got a responsibility to have this on the back end. You don't do that. I've got cover 2. I got to be back over here and keep it clean over the top. I'm single eye safety. I got to keep my center field clean. I've got to set my edge over here if I'm a defensive end. You're not going to be doing a lot of looping around me. No, set your edge. That's what your job is to do. But they're failing at the simple, easy things in the simplified defense, which that's where I move away from it being about, aptitude or intelligence and more of it to the inadequacies of the scheme, the inadequacies of running something so simplified now in this modern era. And it's arrived to where it's become outdated, and it's happened almost overnight, or not overnight, but over the last couple of years, it's reached this point.
Right. Okay, so that's basically the Steelers game for me. I mean, there's not a whole lot to talk about. Neither of these teams are very good. Neither of these teams are exciting. I'm sure the NFL wishes they had moved it when they had the chance, because they could have, and I know they were thinking about it.
Yeah.
So let's go back to this team a little bit to wrap up this stream. So let's talk long term. Let's talk about rebuild. Let's talk about the possibility of a rebuild, because I made a long video about it the other day, talking about the possibility of this team rebuilding. And I kind of likened it to destroying a building. If you're going to destroy a building, do you just want to drop a bomb on it and whatever happens, happens? Or do you want to do an implosion? Do you want to control exactly where everything lands? And do you want to be able to completely dictate what, if anything, gets caught in the crossfire, if you will? So if you don't plan adequately for your rebuild is going to be like that bomb. It's just going to send everything everywhere, and you're going to spend a long time cleaning up. But if you can do an implosion, then you've got everything under control. We've already kind of ruined our ability to do a controlled implosion with this team, because we did kind of do these void year contracts this offseason. We did give Jamal all this money. Wilson still got years on his deal, but you can still start to move in that direction if that is the direction we need to move in and have it be okay. So if we do rebuild this upcoming offseason, what pieces on this roster do you think are salvageable?
Well, I would, and I look at it from a rebuild, of course, of whole hog, because I'm operating, as we were kind of talking about earlier, a little bit less from the assumption that Russell Wilson's willing to come back, even if you're bringing in a coach that he may want. That I think he's going to want to go to a bigger market, get his star brighter. That this year is going to be kind of his done phase with it. I'm making a guess on this. This is completely my gut instinct on it. So I operate from the standpoint of your full implosion is where I would go with this. That I would go down to that. I would do. I think you got to think at the head of this of, when do we go get our next quarterback, almost first and foremost? Not to that you have to go get the next quarterback, but in what you said, your vision of how you do the rebuild. That's the important part. And when I look at it, is because of the first round pick going with Jamal this year, because of some of where the salary stuff is, to me, it's a 2-year rebuild, meaning that you don't look to hit 2022 to be really in that contender phase. It's 2023 where you get into that contender phase. When I looked at this offseason, I ran a few of the numbers. I'm working on a story for this on how I would go about the plan to go for. Essentially, you've got $11 million you save on Russ if you trade him. You've got $16.75 million you save on Bobby by moving off him. And you got $1 million you save off LJ. You're going to sign DK to a new deal, which will be about $27.5 million per year. I've got the first year cap hit at $13.5 million. So the bottom line of that is that after DK signs, after you move on for us, after you move on Bobby, after you move on LJ, you'll be sitting at about $60 million in cap space into this offseason. What I do next at that point is I address the offensive line, because I think teams get this wrong. They get the quarterback first and then try to get the offensive line second, like we're seeing with Cincinnati. Oh, let's get Burrow. And then he gets destroyed for his first couple of years of his career before we finally get an offensive line on point with him. So get the offensive line on point. The quarterbacks suck in this draft. I don't like any of them at the top this upcoming draft as far as the higher end ones. Go into next year's draft to get your quarterback with the offensive line starting to be built, with the salary cap. Now, all of Russell's money's out. All Bobby's money's out. You're not sitting on a lot of dead money hits at that point. You got basically Jamal and DK and Tyler as your only 3 major contracts at that point. So a lot of versatility by 2023 to really go forward. And I go 3-4 with my new defensive scheme to build around Jamal Adams and the best scheme for him. I don't have an exact idea yet on a head coach. I'm still kind of going through all that, but that would be the way, if I was to attack this, that would be my methodology on my approach for it. How about yourself?
Well, my concern, how many appealing head coach candidates or GM candidates could you get who are going to look at that Jamal Adams contract and be comfortable with that? I think a lot of them are going to go, why the hell are we paying $70 million to a safety? I don't want to do that. So that makes things hard.
So here's where I'll contend with you a little on this. I don't think it makes it as hard because the first 3 years of the cap hit for Jamal Adams is actually not substantial, right? It only gets substantial by the third year. And by the third year, you can technically cut out of that deal at not a great big hit. And by the time that third year comes, if you wanted to cut him at that point, you've got Russ and Bobby's money off the books. So you're not having already other substantial dead money on the books that you're having to eat in addition. It's only then that money that you're moving. And you're probably going to get at least a low end draft pick to a team that still thinks he'd be good in a 3-4 if you had to go that. I don't think that Jamal contract's going to be that kind of impediment because of that, because of the way it was structured in the first couple of years of the deal. And in every contract in the NFL, by the third year, once you complete through the third year, you can get out of it. Yeah, there'll be some dead money, but 3 years of the bonus money is eaten off at that point. So you're in a little bit better situation to be able to operate from that, especially if it's, again, think, Brendon, if it's a coach or somebody that's been looking at this situation going, why are you guys doing this like that? You have this. Why are you having him play single high 40% of the time? What if it's a coach that looks at it and goes, you guys have been doing this stupid. I'm going to come in here and do this smart. I'm smarter than you and how you're doing it, Carol. Watch how I utilize him correctly and right. And I think it's very easy for a coach or a general manager to look at the situation here, especially how many news stories have we heard recently, Brendon, from guys like Coward, who talks to general managers throughout the league and scouts throughout the league, where we're almost looked at as a laughing stock at times in our decision-making and our roster building, where they go, what are they doing up there? It's the old throwing spaghetti at the wall and seeing what sticks type of stuff with the way that they go about it. So I think it'll be a little bit of the inverse, where you'll be an attractive spot because of the fact that people know that you're going to commit to doing a winner as long as they're doing what they need to do on their end, which is be smart and make moves that make sense.
Yeah. It just occurs to me that if you bring in, a lot of people say Eric Bieniemy, which I don't know how I feel about Eric Bieniemy. I could go either way there. I'm kind of worried that he might be a Matt Patricia who's just holding a clipboard and doesn't really know anything. But okay, let's say it's Eric Bieniemy. Let's say that it's some people like Lincoln Riley, some people like Joe Brady. A lot of these guys are offense first guys. They're not going to be excited like, oh, yay, we're giving all this money to a safety. Like, can we please not? Can we please just go get some $2 million safeties who don't fall over themselves when in coverage? That's all I really want. But there are definitely a couple of pieces, a couple of guys who, you said DK Metcalf, assuming you keep DK around, which of course he's definitely a blue chip foundational piece. To me, I think Damian Lewis might be there. And even if he's not, he's under a rookie contract still. So he's going to stick around regardless.
Agreed.
And also the other guy who stands out to me through these first 5 games is Darrell Taylor. Not that he's playing perfectly, but I'm seeing maximum effort from him at all times, and he's making plays for this defense. So maybe those are kind of the guys that you build around if you decide to do the full rebuild. Maybe those are the 3 guys who are salvageable.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. And beyond that, the thing is, if you feel like there's some bad coaching going on this defense, which there almost certainly is, I'm really hesitant to pass judgment on some of these guys. Like, I don't really like Jordan Brooks. I didn't like the pick. I didn't like it when we drafted him. I'm not a fan of his, but he might not be nearly as bad as he looks because of the simple fact that the coaching's bad. Alton Robinson, I talked him up after the first 2 games, and he hasn't really impressed me since, but that I don't know. I don't want to get rid of any of these guys and watch them go somewhere else and play really well because the coaching was bad, because that's something that just sets you back so far, to have the good player that you could have built around a little bit and then get rid of him because you misidentified the problem.
I think that there won't necessarily be a lot of that going on. Like an Alton Robinson, they've got to have some trade value to offload him versus the value they have in the team. You look at like young pass rushers. LJ will be gone after this year. Carlos will probably be gone after this year. Rasheem Green will be gone after this year. So you're not sitting on a lot of young pass rushers as it is. You'll probably hold, even as a new coach, those 2 new young guys in here. To your point on Jordan Brooks as well, let's not forget, he's playing out of position. He didn't play Will in college. That wasn't his position in college, was the will linebacker. He's a middle linebacker. You're playing him at a different position and he's failing at the different position. I think you can make the argument, and built into my plan, of course, is that you do move on from Bobby. $17 million is a substantial amount of money to save. I think Jordan Brooks gives you a pretty close approximation to what you're getting out of Bobby Wagner right now. Slash might even have some upside there once you slide him to a new position. So I don't think he would be a guy that goes. I think offensive or defensive minded coaches. And to be honest with you, I want to do more of a deep dive into really all the potential guys that are out there, even going to the Iowa coach and looking at him, right? Looking really thoroughly, who's the best candidate here rather than just necessarily the name, which is Bieniemy to me is more of a name. Lincoln Riley more appeals to me if you're keeping Russell Wilson, being he has a lot of success with smaller, height deficient quarterbacks and getting them to play at a really good level, along with his creativity that he meshes between those two things. So I'm kind of okay with a variety of different guys you bring in. But I think that they're going to be in a good situation as far as even the Jamal Adams thing. Like, let's say you want to move off of Jamal this offseason, but you're a new coach or new general manager coming in, and you're operating from my assumption of we're not going to really be in that compete mode 2022. We've got to undo all this Carroll nonsense to get to 2023. Well, with the $60 million you're saving, if you really wanted to move Jamal for a second or third rounder at that point, I believe it's like $16 million dead money hit or something like that. Where if you're just, I can't use him. I don't want him for my defense. Like, they could still do that if they wanted to. And being a new general manager, you have the goodwill as the new guy on the block to pull that off if you wanted to without getting beaten by the fans, because it's the previous guy's poor move. It's not my poor move. I didn't trade the Jets 2 first round. I'm just coming and cleaning up the mess. I'm just the janitor here. I think there's a little bit of that could come in place, as well as not impeding them, in that fashion, And again, too, once you get off of Bobby, he's the only guy, Jamal, you're paying any substantial money to on this defense. Who else are you paying? You're going to be out of Dunlap's contract. You're Puna and him. That's it. Quandres is gone after this year,
Yeah, and there are a couple guys who you might be obligated to keep around, like Tyler Lockett, because we just extended him, and maybe Gabe Jackson because of his extension too. I don't know about that, but that's possible. But teams have guys like that. Like, I did a deep dive into the rebuild that the Eagles did after they had to fire Chip Kelly and get Doug Peterson. And you see how much the roster changes in just 1 or 2 seasons.
Yeah.
And you can see that you can turn over a team, because remember, the last year of Chip Kelly in Philly, they gave monster contracts to Byron Maxwell and DeMarco Murray. And those guys were both out of there almost immediately. There was a big dead money hit, but they were just like, I don't care. Get out of here. I don't want you.
Yeah.
So they sucked it up for 1 year, and it really paid off for them. So you do see teams do that. And those teams, like that Eagles team, they had guys who carried over, like Fletcher Cox. They decided this guy is good enough to build around even in a new, completely different regime.
Yeah.
Malcolm Jenkins, he was already kind of a veteran when the Chip Kelly era came to an end, and they kept him around, and he helped them win a Super Bowl. So there are going to be guys like that.
They got that defense, Brandon Graham too.
Brandon Graham, yeah, there you go. There's another good one. So there are going to be pieces from this core that we can salvage. It's not impossible. Some people are really, really attached to Wilson. I know that. Some people really don't want to rebuild, even if they hate Carroll because they don't want to lose Wilson. I guess you could keep Wilson, but that would be very awkward, and it would involve him getting the crap kicked out of him next year behind a new rebuilt offensive line, and it would require him to be okay with kind of losing by design next year. I don't know. So
plus we've got to admit too with Wilson, and maybe he comes back in the back half of the schedule and shows out. There was questions this year about him acclimating to a new modernized offense. I'd hoped and thought that it was going to take his game to a new level eventually, but we can only go off of the data we got through 5 games, which is he's at his most successful through 5 games by relying on the old habits that did him so well through the first 10 years under Schottenheimer and Bevel, not really on operating this new offense. There were moments he did the new offense decently, but it was more of that old school stuff. There is an argument to be made about whether or not he needs to go to an offense that is now just that down the field. I mean, the no risk it, no biscuit Arians offense would probably be a good offense for Russell Wilson, as opposed to the West Coast precision short passing game we find ourselves in, or what a new coach might want in that realm too. Be it a Bieniemy type or whatever, who's going to come from a West Coast offense background with Reed. So that's the problem here with Russell getting injured at this point too, is in making the determination that he should be on. And I'm with you. I've got people, I'm sure you're in your chat, say if Russell goes, I'll no longer be a fan of the Seahawks, which I don't quite get. But that's where a lot of people are at it. That's my one thing with this, though, is that it's about getting the team better in the future. And I love Russell. He's a great player, but if you're going to keep him, then you've got to wrap your arms fully around him in every way and shape and form in the way you haven't up until this point. That means building a full offensive line. It goes offensive first in your the way you're team building, essentially, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just difficult to imagine pulling that off at this point. It would be, the Cowboys tried that with Tony Romo. They were like, "Oh, we're going to rebuild, but we're going to keep our quarterback who's in his prime," and it kind of worked for one decent year, and then Romo's back broke, and then it was over, and then they had wasted this great offensive line they built because it just never meshed.
No,
it never came together all at the right time. And it probably would have if they had just gotten rid of Romo when they decided to do the rebuild. Sometimes that's just smart football.
And you're on point with the fact that what you just said a second ago too about don't be scared of a rebuild. We have a lot of people within our chat, I'm sure you do too, that are frightened. Oh, we're going to be the Cincinnati Bengals, the Detroit Lions, or things can turn around faster than football than any other sport by far. It doesn't take 5 years to get there. You can turn things around so quickly if you just embrace the turnaround, embrace the rebuild, embrace the implosion down to the studs, take it all the way down, Kingdom style. You know what I mean? And then rebuild back around it. Does it mean you're going to be successful with the new rebuild? No, but it's not a closed path. It's not now we're into the dark ages of this team for the next 20 years because Carroll's moved on or because Russell Wilson's moved on. That's not necessarily how it goes in this modern NFL. It's built with parity and teams to go up and down year in and year out. There's 4 new playoff teams, I think, every year, right, Brendon? Something like that from either conference. It's just the nature of this beast in this sport, and you got to kind of embrace it, I think, to a degree. Would you, one thing I'm wondering from you, what is your ideal if this plays out at the narrative we're going at right now? We just hold the type through the rest of the year, 7-10 or something, right? Whatever.
Mm-hmm.
You're walking in as a new general manager to make or not the general manager. You're taking over for Arnold. Okay. You're on that. Mm-hmm. You're leading that committee. You're coming in the door and you're sitting down with Carroll and Schneider. And what are you doing under your ideal scenario in that situation?
I definitely am going to go ahead and clean house at that point. I don't think there's much of a point. I mean, people are afraid of a rebuild because it leads to bad seasons, but by my count, 7-10 is a bad season anyway. So you can have bad seasons without rebuilding. They're just in service of nothing at that point. That's the only real difference. So yeah, I would strongly favor blowing it up at that point and just trying to do something different. I'm just ready to do something else. And I think that I don't know who I would hire. I'm kind of like you. I'm not crazy about the Bieniemy thing yet. Lincoln Riley's interesting, but I don't why would he ever leave Oklahoma where he has a free playoff spot every year?
It's true. The only thing I can think of there's a possibility Lincoln that might be attractive to him is that, like Coach Carroll was waiting for a long period in USC to choose the right place to go, and that right. Maybe having a guy like Russell, who is a Hall of Fame quarterback, that he gets to go to that's maybe attractive if Russell still is here. I think if Russell isn't here, that makes complete sense as to why it wouldn't. That was my only wonder, is that maybe he's looking for that not just the right opportunity in the right city, but I'm not having to go in here and reinvent the wheel. There's some stuff in point for me to hit the ground running here and have a better chance of being successful, as opposed to having to put it all together from square one, you know?
Yeah, possibly. But there are a couple other guys who I think make a little more sense. Somebody like a Joe Brady. That's kind of the college guy who's caught my attention, who I've been thinking about. Some people are suggesting Patrick Graham, but he's not having a good season in New York. He's their defensive coordinator. He had a really good year last year. Now this year, so I don't know about that. I also don't know where this leaves Waldron, because a lot of guys you bring in are going to want to bring their own guy with them. So Waldron, it could be a one and done, which is also bad for Wilson if he stays around, because it means another new offensive system. You spend 1 year in this Waldron system, and then you, it's just, but if he goes to another team, it's the same thing. So everything just kind of sucks there. But sometimes you can only make a decision between multiple bad choices.
And sometimes there's just not a good choice. That's it. Good point. I mean, this is where we're going to find ourselves a little bit this offseason if it does play out this way. And it's not awesome, but it doesn't mean you don't deal with it in the right fashion and say, okay, let's be, sober and realize we got to do on this and take care of it. So you take Schneider out too, then Schneider, Carroll, Wilson, all go at that point.
I think Schneider and Carroll are connected at the hip. I think if one goes, the other goes too. I don't think you can really separate those guys.
Yeah.
And to me, if you're going to get rid of one, you may as well get rid of the other. I could be completely wrong. I know those guys feel differently about certain players sometimes. Like, I think Schneider didn't like Metcalf very much, and Carroll didn't like Marquise Blair very much, and they kind of compromised by taking both or something. There was something going on there like that.
Yeah, I'd agree. You got to figure there's
Yeah.
got to be some kind of give and take there when you have that situation set up like it is, where Carroll is de facto the head and Schneider's general manager. But the bad choices don't fall. Like, we don't get to hear about, oh, it was Carroll that loved LJ Collier, or Carroll was on. Instead it's like we got to kind of piece it between the two of who is what and where. Do you think the worst case scenario for this team, because this is my worst case scenario, is that they muddle through that 7-10 in record, but because Coach Carroll and Schneider just signed 5-year extensions last year, and Jody Allen's so kind of checked out of the process, that we end up with Wilson moving on and then having to trust a rebuild with Coach Carroll and Schneider here with their track record recently?
Oh yeah, that is without a doubt. That is without a doubt the worst case scenario. That is, I'm just so done with the Carroll stuff. I just don't think it's going to work anymore. I don't believe him anymore. I don't believe the stuff that he says in press conferences. I don't believe in his decision making. And yeah, that is absolutely the worst case scenario, because at that point, what are you getting? You're probably getting like Teddy Bridgewater or some quarterback that he thinks won't turn the ball over, or Jacoby Brissett, or somebody like that, game manager type. And I'm not interested in that, because I don't think his defense is going to work anymore.
No.
But
Yeah.
I think we have to prepare for that possibility. Unfortunately, I think we do have to acknowledge that in some ways, Carroll now has a pretty good excuse that he can take to management this offseason if the season goes bad and if he feels heat. And I've long theorized that he's kind of using Ken Norton the way... Did you ever watch Survivor? The reality show? Yeah, he's kind of using Ken Norton as like his immunity idol. In some seasons of Survivor, like, you can win an immunity idol that makes it so you can't get voted out at the next tribal council, but you have to decide to play it ahead of time. So you can decide, I'm going to save it and then get voted out, and then you're just screwed and you messed up. I feel like he's kind of saving that immunity idol to where he can go, oh, it's not my fault the defense is bad. It's all Ken Norton's fault. I'll fire him and I'll fix it, I promise. And he feels like that can buy him another year. I almost feel like Carroll's trying to play a game of Survivor with Ken Norton. If he fires him now, he's already spending his immunity idol, and he knows that if he doesn't fix the defense this year, it's going to come back to him. But keeping Norton around allows him to just say, hey, it's his fault until I fire him. I'm not going to fire him until I absolutely have to. I almost kind of feel like that.
I could see it exactly being that way. I could, and I could see Carroll doing that to get another year out of it. 100%, I could see him doing that. And they've got their excuses that they make on stuff, which is BS. We've seen them point to things that are BS before. Well, we practice it all week, but then the players just, something's BS on that. So absolutely, he would do it that way. And because you don't have ownership that is as active as Paul Allen was, and that isn't as going to hold the feet to the fire, they might be predisposed, especially if this team's in the process of being sold. Let's remember this too, is that we very well may be having this team right now in the market to be sold, and it's a more hotter commodity as far as to sell with Coach Carroll here. Maybe whether that's right or wrong, that may be what they're thinking for the stability of the organization and all that when you're bringing on as a new owner. I don't know, but it would be I will not be a happy camper, Brendon, if we're having to go through a rebuild with him and the moves we're going to be seeing, and you and I are going to have to be covering it, and it's going to be stuff that's like a lot of, again, why did you do this? Why are they doing that? This guy? Why this guy? That's the part I think we're going to get more of, which would bum me out completely if it goes that way.
Yeah. And I think the thing people need to understand is owners are not looking for an excuse to fire people. They're looking for an excuse to not fire people, because firing people is hard and stressful, and it requires you to go out and find somebody else who might be bad or worse. Like, they don't want an excuse.
Yeah.
Like Jody Allen is not going to be looking for a reason to fire Carroll. She's going to be looking for one to keep him. Yeah. Jason Garrett coached as the Cowboys head coach for 9.5 years, despite never winning anything, because every offseason Jerry Jones found another excuse to keep him. And that's an owner who really wants to win. So most of the time, the only exception recently I can think of would be like Doug Peterson. And that was because he asked for more power in the organization after a 4-win season. They're like, okay, you get out of here.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
that makes sense in that. And yeah, I think Doug was at that point trying to get his way out of Philly. That was my feeling
Yeah.
too, is he just was done with that situation and
Hmm.
how that was playing out. But
Hmm.
yeah, man, it's going to be interesting to see where this goes, Brendon. I don't know, but
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah. So I think that's really all we got for this week, man. I mean, thank you everybody for coming out. We got like 155 people in here right now. I
oh
appreciate all
yeah,
the support. Appreciate all you guys watching. We would not be doing this if it were not for you guys. You guys have helped make this happen. We're having a bad season. We're obviously, a lot of us are in different stages of the 5 stages of depression or whatever. We're all in different phases. But one thing that I want everybody to understand coming out of this stream, and the final message I'm going to kind of send here, is it didn't have to be this way. Some people are acting like this is some inevitable result of having success for 10 straight years. It's not. It did not have to be this way. It did not have to go where your defense is one of the worst in the league. It did not have to go where your offensive line is just kind of patchwork at best. It didn't have to go this way. And don't think that this is just luck. Don't think this is just what happens sometimes. No, there are teams out there, only the most successful teams, that manage to replicate success almost every year for a long, long time because they make the right decisions.
yes.
These things that are happening with this team right now are not just the randomness of flipping a coin or rolling the dice. No, these things are because we make the wrong decisions with coaches. We make the wrong decisions with players, make the wrong decisions with scheme, and you get the results that you get.
Oh, well said, man. I would just echo there. Where are we as a comparative organization? Are we more like Rams or not Rams, but yeah, Rams, Steelers? The smarter organizations we're known as, or should we hold ourselves to the standard of the Detroit Lions, the Cincinnati Bengals, and the lesser run organizations in this sport? We should be up here. We should be in the smart lane of things. And so to Brendon's point on this, we over this stream have probably brought up about 20 to 25 specific things you can look at, which are gross miscalculations by this organization, which are stupid decisions that they made, head scratching decisions, things that don't make sense for even at a rudimentary layman level. That is where, to Brendon's point on this, you can connect the tissue of the failure to who is responsible rather than the failure to some random occurrence. And that's what we've been trying to do in this stream, as we've talked about this, is giving you guys exact points that you can actually look at this and 40% of Jamal Adams and free is a free safety. What? Huh? That's what we're doing here, is trying to stack this up to show, no, there's just quantifiable things to build off of, you can look to and point to and say, this is why we're upset about this. This is why these people need to be held responsible. This is why this is unacceptable going forward, because we're going to get the same results if we don't change it. That's the bottom line from my standpoint.
Right. So I think that's going to do it for us. We went a little longer than we usually do. I want to thank Brendon once again for coming out and being part of the show this week. I'm not going to do a score prediction for the Steelers game because I don't want to have to say it. And if Brendon wants to, he can, but I doubt he's.
Oh, you're gonna make me dive into the deep end when
if
you're.
you want to, but I don't even want to say it.
It was a little bit like last week when we did this. I have no confidence in knowing what the hell I'm going to see from this team week in and week out. So I can make a prediction, but it is just basically me pulling numbers out of my butt. I tend to think we'll keep them under 30 points. I tend to think Steelers are going to probably win this game by 7 points. That's basically probably about where I stand.
Yeah, that sounds about right to me. I would be willing to go with that. But even if we do win, the problems still exist. Yeah. If we do win on Sunday, don't let it distract you from the problems with this organization right now. So, yeah. And we as fans need to try to be smart about this, because there's not a whole lot we can do to affect whether or not this team makes good decisions or bad decisions. But whatever little power we have, we got to use it right now, because if you want things to be better, then you got to do whatever your little part of it to try to affect change. And if you think that what's happening on the field right now for the Seahawks this year is just luck or randomness or just stuff happens, then no, that's basically implying that we don't need to do anything different. Just flip the coin again next year. No.
Exactly. We got to get change, folks. And it's going to require you being real about what you're seeing out there. Don't gloss over. Don't get caught up on what happened 10 years ago with this team. Get caught up on what's happened in the last couple of years, because we're going to need you. I'm going to need Brendon. Brendon's going to need me. We're going to need you guys to affect this change and not to be excusing it. You excuse it if there's enough of you that gloss over. If the voices aren't loud enough, you're going to get more of the same over the next couple of years.
Mm-hmm. And on that note, I'm going to get out of here. Thank you, everybody, for showing up. I will see you guys later on. You can catch Brendon on his channel, The Hawk's Nest. He's streaming a couple times a week now, I think.
Yeah.
And when he streams, he goes all out. He streams for several hours. He streams one day. He will probably do a 24-hour stream for some charity thing. I don't know. Somebody will probably contact him about that. Like, hey, you want to try to break a record?
I'll be game too. I'll be game.
Yeah.
You know, I'll do it, Brendon. So
Yeah.
I appreciate you. Well, thank you for having me in here as well. I really love doing this every week with you, man. It's so much fun talking Seahawks shop with somebody just as invested as deeply, if not more deeply invested as I am on this team. So thank you. I really do appreciate doing this with you.
All right. I will see you guys later. Again, go catch the Hawk's Nest. He streams a few times a week. And I will see you guys later on. Go Hawks.
Go Hawks, folks.